You know, I remember reading Wu-Tang Clan member Raekwon's book called From Staircase to Stage. And he said in one of the chapters that he wanted to name his album The Wu Gambinos, but he had got word from his boss, Steve Rifkin, that he couldn't use that Gambino's name because he'll be risking his life. He didn't want to play. He didn't want to play with the mafia, man. Because if you didn't know, for years, the mob and the mafia controlled a lot of the industries. The trash and waste management industry, construction, the casinos, restaurants, and many more. But one industry they specifically controlled and everybody was dying to get in was the music industry. And way back in the day, a genre of music they had their hands in was jazz music. When Prohibition hit in 1918, that's when the mob started to rise because they had the alcohol and people still wanted to drink and party. And that's when a lot of the mobsters they started buying all the clubs and the bars, which created a lot of jobs for musicians. They brought the entertainment and had a lot of musicians under contracts. You know, the entertainment industry can be very dangerous, and especially back then. Look at what happened to Sam Cooke, 1964. They try to say a black female worker from the hotel or motel, whatever, shot and killed him, but some say it was a cover-up. He was really murdered for trying to leave his mob-affiliated business partners. And he was trying to start his own label, and he was helping and teaching black artists the business. That same year, in 1964, Jackie Wilson didn't want to re-sign with his record label, Brunswick Records, and try to get out of his contract with his manager, Nat Turnerpool. Nat Turnerpool was connected to the mob. And he tried to get out of it, but it didn't work. They held him upside down, out the window, up a story hotel building, and made him sign the contract. The Dells in an interview said that whole Five Heartbeats thing, that's where that come from. Just like Suge Knight did, rapper Vanilla Ice. But you know, back in the jazz era, man, once you deal with them in that era and start working for them at the club, performing and everything, because they own the nightclubs, the record labels, and the music stores, you was stuck forever. You couldn't quit and start performing somewhere else. Singer actress Lena Horne, she tried to quit one time. She tried to quit working at the Cotton Club, which was owned by gangster Oni Madden, right? Lena Horne's stepfather, I guess, was her manager or something. I guess he approached Oni Madden and told him that she needed to be paid more. Man, they almost beat that man to death. Lena Horne said she also said she had to be kidnapped in the middle of the night in order to leave the city to play other venues and shows. Oni Madden told her, "Nobody leaves the Cotton Club until we say so." Wow, that's how it was back then. And look, one time, right, Lena Horne was also asked by mobster Bugsy Siegel to perform at his hotel, the Flamingo. And Lena Horne's, her demands to Bugsy Siegel was that she would perform, but if he let her stay in the hotel, because at that time, blacks weren't allowed to stay in the nice hotels with white people. So what Bugsy Siegel did, Bugsy Siegel, he let her stay in the cabana. And then he had the black maids take the bed linens off every night and burn them. Wow, that's crazy, because they felt that black people were unclean back then. You know, back then, if you was a black entertainer, you could perform at the white clubs, but you had to leave out the back door. You couldn't come in the front door. You had to leave out the back door and stay in the black motel, which was a real rundown motels that looked like shacks. A lot of the hotels in Las Vegas refused to allow black performers to eat there, drink, sleep, or gamble, Even the workers there couldn't do none of that at the casinos back then. And it was just not in Vegas either. Just about every state at that time was like that. But they all had to deal with that. A lot of the black celebrities, they had to deal with the gangsters if they wanted to be in the entertainment business. All the famous black stars, Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, Bill Mr. Bojangles Robinson, the Nicholas brothers, Nat King Cole, Harry Belafonte. Speaking of Harry Belafonte, rest in peace to him. He just died recently, but Harry Belafonte, he said he had went to Vegas one time back in 1952 to perform at the Thunderbird, which was ran by gangsters. But Harry Belafonte one time, he refused to stay in one of the black ran down motels, and he was so mad about it, he didn't want to perform that night. And he tried to get out of his contract, right, with the mob that owned the club. But they told him the only way he gonna leave Las Vegas without fulfilling his obligations was in a box. Harry Belafonte had mob connections too, though. He had some mob connections and friends too. And he made a few calls and got the situation worked out. Another jazz musician is Louis Armstrong, who had to deal with the mob and the mafia a lot too coming up. For those who don't know who Louis Armstrong is, Satchmo. Look him up. Look up and listen to the song called What a Wonderful World. But anyway, now, Louis Armstrong got his start during the Prohibition and the Great Depression era too, where all the gangsters ran the clubs and the bars underground. He didn't want to get mixed up with them though. He didn't want to get all mixed up with them, but he didn't have a choice. If he wanted to be a musician, he had to deal with them. Like one incident was when he was trying to get out of a contract with a gangster named Tommy Rockwell from New York, who actually helped him with one of his songs, but he tried to get out of the contract with him, right? It didn't end well because Tommy Rockwell showed up to where he was at with a baseball bat. Another time, Louis Armstrong, he was playing at this club in New York, and the club ended up shutting down. It went out of business, so he thought he was free. Louis Armstrong thought he was free. He tried not to honor the contract, right? So he went to Chicago and found a new manager and everything, trying to be sneaky, until them gangsters from New York found him and threatened him at gunpoint at one of his shows there to come back and finish the shows in New York they had for him. Louis Armstrong, right, he got tired of dealing with the mob and the gangsters who had him under contract in the United States. And he thought he'd be slick and just go overseas, right? But when he came back, it was time to come back to the U.S., scared to death. He needed protection, and that's when he asked another gangster named Joe Glasser to be his manager and protector because he was down with Al Capone's gang. That's who saved him. That's who saved Louis Armstrong. And speaking of Al Capone, now let's get into the story of jazz musician Fats Waller and his encounter with mob boss Al Capone. Now see, Al Capone was a big fan of black jazz music around the 1920s. He had just became the boss of the Chicago Outfits mob, and his 27th birthday was coming up. And it's well documented that Al Capone used to hire and pay black jazz musicians to play at bars and clubs for him, for good money though. He always paid them good money. So anyway, some of his members in his gang wanted to do something nice for Al Capone's 27th birthday. And they came up with the idea of surprising him with a special performance from jazz musician Fats Waller, right? And at the time, Fats Waller was one of the hottest artists out. He had the song Ain't Misbehaving and Honeysuckle Rose, and them songs was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Fats Waller could play the piano, violin, and organ. He was gifted. So look, one night, right, he just finished the show. Fats Waller had just finished a show, and he ended up being approached by 4 men, and they kidnapped him at gunpoint. They had the guns to him, and they put him in back of a limousine, and drove him to a hotel that Al Capone owned. And once he entered the building, they took him straight to a piano and told him to play. Gunpoint, play. And he didn't know what was going on. Scared for his life, he did what he was told. And after he played the song, Fats Waller turned around and looked to see who was out in the crowd. And he only saw one person clapping, which was Al Capone. Wow, that's crazy. And look, for the next 3 days, he was there playing for Al Capone, earning $100 per song, eating the best food and having the best drinks of his life. And after those 3 days of playing was over, they took him back home in a limousine with thousands of dollars in his pocket. Wow. But let's get into the greatest entertainer in the world, which is Sammy Davis Jr. and his journey with dealing with the mob. That's who I really want to talk about on this episode. His affiliation with the mafia and how he almost lost his life for messing with a white actress named Kim Novak. Because see, growing up, Sammy always dealt with a lot of racism anyway all his life. He was in the military. He said he had to fight like 2-3 times a day. And he got his nose broken so much. That's why it's flat like that. But see, when Sammy got into the mob-affiliated crew called the Rat Pack, he was protected. Now, how he became a Rat Pack member was through Frank Sinatra. Because see, Sammy and Sinatra, they go way back. They met back in 1941 when Frank Sinatra was about 26 years old and Sammy Davis was about 15 years old when he was performing with his father and uncle as the Will Maston Trio. And they had opened up for Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra in Detroit. So after that, right, years later, Frank Sinatra would have Sammy open up for him, and they became good friends. And they say Frank Sinatra was the one who told Sammy he should pursue a singing career. And once he started hanging with Frank Sinatra, Sammy could go anywhere and do what he wanted under Frank Sinatra's protection, because everybody knew that Frank Sinatra was connected to the mob. He was connected to the biggest mobsters, Charles Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, and a bunch of other mobsters. Supposedly, I heard they put the money up for Frank Sinatra to be a mega star in the entertainment business. But anyway, so the Rat Pack, right? The Rat Pack consisted of Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford in the beginning. But Frank Sinatra had a falling out with Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford told his brother-in-law, which was President John F. Kennedy, to stay away from Frank Sinatra because he was connected to Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana. The crazy part is before they came with the name Rat Pack, which was originally created by actor Humphrey Bogart, before the Rat Pack name, they used to call themselves the Klan, but they changed that because of the Ku Klux Klan and the negativity in the name, everything. But anyway, so Sammy Davis, now protected in the Rat Pack through his good friend Frank Sinatra. Sammy, for some reason, didn't think he had to face racism because he was with the Rat Pack. He started to get a little kind of cocky, and wanted to prove to the white man that he can get the whitest famous woman, and he wanted to rub it in their face. And at that time, Kim Novak was the new hot girl on the movie scene, and Sammy was dying to meet her. Now, how he met actress Kim Novak, like I said, Sammy always wanted to meet her. She was one of the hottest movie stars at the time, and the thing is, she wanted to meet him too. He was in the club performing, and he saw her in the crowd, and he started singing to her. Because see, back then, the white women were crazy for Sammy Davis Jr. Even though the white men used to joke on him, they used to joke on him and make fun of him and say he was ugly They would write articles about him in the magazines and newspapers saying it looked like somebody hit him in the face with a shovel and everything. But the white women thought he was sexy. They thought Sammy Davis Jr. was it. They were attracted to the way he moved his body, the way he danced, his singing. He can do pop, rock, blues, jazz, country. He can play the trumpet, drums, guitar, violin, bass, sax, piano, many instruments. They loved this talent. He was talented. That's why they call him the greatest entertainer in the world. But anyway, so around 1957, actor Tony Curtis had threw a party at his house, and he invited Kim Novak and Sammy Davis. That way they can meet each other. And when her and Sammy had met, people at the party noticed the chemistry between them was kind of a little too deep. And that's when the rumors and the gossip had got out that they were dating just from that party. And it was all over the media. And that's when Sammy felt bad and he felt bad about the whole Kim Novak's name all in the media. So he called Kim Novak and he apologized for all the mess and the rumors that was going on. And look, Kim Novak told Sammy, don't worry about it. She does what she wants and nobody owns her. And then she invited him over to her house in Beverly Hills for a dinner, a spaghetti dinner. And you know, from there, their romance started. But they had to be careful though, because it was dangerous, especially for Sammy. But as far as Kim Novak, it wasn't dangerous. The only thing she risked was being blackballed from Hollywood. But for Sammy, he could get killed because during that time, that's a no-no. Interracial dating really wasn't accepted. It was actually still illegal in half the states. They had just approved at that time, no more segregation in public schools, which was causing a lot of racial tension at that time. Emmett Till had just got killed, 1955? This was 1957 when they met. But anyway, so, you know, Sammy Davis and Kim Novak, they were in love, I guess. They were in love and they tried to keep their relationship on the low. And Sammy, you know, he would have somebody drive him over to her house while he would hide in the back of the car with blankets and rugs all over him to avoid the press and just people looking to catch them together. It was so deep. Their love was so deep. They was about to get married. They had got a marriage license and everything, but they didn't sign the paper, I guess. But that relationship, right, when movie mogul Harry Kahn heard about Sammy and Kim Novak's relationship, he was furious to the point he had a heart attack. They say he had a heart attack when he heard the news. Now, who is Harry Kahn, right? Harry Kahn, CEO of Columbia Pictures and had the most power in Hollywood at that time. He was responsible for a lot of actors and actresses' careers. And Kim Novak was his new rising star. That was his new rising star that he was grooming and had under contract. He had just got her in the new movie from Alfred Hitchcock called Vertigo. Plus, Harry Kahn was affiliated with the mob heavily. He was dangerous, man. He was a powerful and serious guy. And when he had heard about Sammy and Kim Novak's relationship, he wanted them to stop immediately because he didn't think that people wanted to see his white star, Kim Novak, with a black guy. He thought that would hurt her acting career. So what he did was he put in a few calls to his mob connections to not kill Sammy, but to hurt him and just beat him up and rough him up a little. Enough to scare him, right? The contract he had out on Sammy Davis Jr. was to break both his legs, put his other eye out, and bury him in a hole. Wow. Y'all know Sammy only had one eye from that car accident, supposedly. He had one eye, he had a glass eye. But, Harry Khan put a contract out on him. And that's when Sammy Davis' father, Sr., Sammy Davis Jr.'s father, Sammy Sr., had got a call from gangster Mickey Cohen, who used to run with legendary gangster Bugsy Siegel. Sammy's father got a call from him. And, Mickey Cohen told Sammy's father that there was the contract out on his son, Sammy Davis Jr. But the contract would go away if Sammy leave Kim Novak alone and marry a black woman in 24 hours. And when Sammy got the message from his father, he was scared to death. Scared. And that's when he got in contact with Frank Sinatra and mobster boss Sam Giancana from Chicago for protection. He wanted protection from them. But Sam Giancana told him that he couldn't help him in Hollywood. He said he can help him in Chicago and protect him, and Las Vegas. He had connects and power out there, but he couldn't help him. He couldn't protect him in Hollywood, California. He didn't have power like that out there. And once they told Sammy they couldn't protect him, now he really was scared to death. So he decided to go with the plan, man. He decided to find a black woman he could hurry up and marry. And that's when he got in contact with a singer named Lorraine White, who he used to date back in the day. And, he told her what was going on, and he offered her like $25,000 if she would marry him. And then once things cooled down, they would get divorced and everything. So, now Sammy Davis Jr.'s driver at that time said that same night that Sammy got married, Sammy was so upset and heartbroken about Kim Novak, just heartbroken about the whole thing, that he got drunk and tried to strangle Lorraine White that night. Wow. He was in love with Kim Novak, and, he said Sammy broke down in tears and said, why won't they let him live his life? Wow. Sammy's driver also said that he had to stop Sammy from putting the gun to his head and killing himself. He wanted to kill himself. He was heartbroken over Kim Novak. But 3 years later, Sammy ended up marrying white actress Ma Britt, and he received a lot of backlash from that too. Death threats and racial mess. He received a lot of stuff from black and white people this time. I mean, man, I'm gonna do that Sammy Davis Jr. story, man, because I'll be here all night getting into it. But that story's coming soon. But that's it, y'all. But that's what it is, though. Y'all stay tuned for more episodes. And thank y'all for y'all support.